Clint Eastwood got that I haven't got?
Well, for one thing, I'm not gonna fire Clint Eastwood, and I am gonna fire you.
Oh, sure. Fire the duck. Roast the duck. Parboil the duck. Anything to humiliate the duck.
What's up, Docs and Docettes? Trevor Thompson, the self-appointed Looney Tunes critic here, and in a time when we're supposed to be thankful, I present to you Daffy Duck's Thanks for Giving Special, an extremely threadbare and unthoughtful paste-up produced by a beginning-of-the-end Chuck Jones and a Jew-hating Hal Gear. And in the spirit of the holiday, I encourage you to be thankful. Thankful that I didn't do a commentary of it. There's no need to bring an innocent along to witness this. Fear not, Jan Matthew. I shall go it alone. See you for Christmas commentary. And also, speaking of commentaries, to do one runs the entire length of the thing, but everything that can be said about this dumpster fire of a special can be said in less than 10 minutes. So let's examine what went wrong with this thing. Or, in the spirit of the holiday, let's unstuff this turkey.
Gobble, gobble, gobble.
The special begins by setting up the very weak premise that Daffy is reminiscing about what he received from previous holidays, and decides that upon seeing in his calendar that Thanksgiving is approaching, he can receive thanks. So he channels that thanks into the form of pitching a cartoon, and the rest of the special is Daffy in JL's office, reminding him of 3 other cartoons he did once: Robin Hood Daffy, Drip Along Daffy, and His Bitter Half. Then at the end, JL approves it, and we see that the cartoon in question is Duck Dodgers and the Return of the 24th and a Half Century, a delightful cartoon. That is, of course, only if you're watching it in the hospital after receiving analingus by way of a school of horny piranhas.
Gossamer is quite nervous about piranha.
Let's just start by saying it. This Thanksgiving special has very little to do with Thanksgiving. In fact, this is the only segment of the special that has anything to do with Thanksgiving at all, even where Thanksgiving is even mentioned. It literally feels like Chuck Jones was making a special about Daffy pitching a cartoon one year, and then they got held up in production and realized they weren't going to finish until November, so they tacked on this intro and made it about Thanksgiving at the last goddamn second. Seriously, the rest of the special is Daffy arguing with JL, and they used new and old animation here. When they come back from commercial, it starts with old animation from the Scarlet Pumpernickel, and the problem that would be later solved with Daffy Duck's Quackbusters, that of the transition between new and old animation, is as jarring as ever here. Everything about the new animation is different, and it shows. Chuck's drawing style is odd, his timing is sluggish, Mel's voice is starting to go, Dean Elliott's music doesn't hold a candle to Stalling's scores. It's just jarring going back and forth like that. These specials make me carsick. Matt Hunter and I expressed this when we did the Halloween commentary a few weeks ago, but it's weird to think of these Hal Gear produced specials as so bad when you consider that, from a percentage standpoint, the vast majority of them are made up of mostly classic animation. We get to see almost the entirety of His Bitter Half, a very rare cartoon today, by the way, and it's one of Fred Freeling's best. A lot of us are left asking, why don't they just play the cartoons uncut? I mean, think about it from the studio's point of view. If you're not willing to spend the money to hire the right people, I apologize, just a diatribe, but just because they worked on the old shorts doesn't mean they were good enough to keep working well into, past retirement age. As we've seen with people like the brilliant Mark Kousler, sometimes it's best to have the old timers teach, but get out of the way. Anyway, sorry, that's just a point for another day. Anyway, if you from the studio standpoint, if you're not willing to spend the money and you don't want to make any effort to do something good, which clearly at this time they weren't interested in that, then don't. Just pick 3 or 4 cartoons and run them. We'll watch. And while you're at it, pick cartoons about Thanksgiving. Come on, Chuck. You're doing a special with Daffy about Thanksgiving and you're not going to include Holiday for Drumsticks? That's a no-brainer. And apparently so were you when you made this thing. So that's really all it is. Daffy looks at his accolades from previous holidays, decides that he needs more thanks, so he spends the rest of the special asking the head of the studio to let him make the Duck Dodgers cartoon, and to make his point, he references 3 other cartoons he did once. And this is how it all ends. This is the tacked on little piece of animation after the Duck Dodgers cartoon. I'm sorry, fair use gods, but I'm playing every little bit of it, and it's less than a minute, so you can bite me.
Brilliant film, eh, JL? Didn't I confirm your faith in me?
Interesting. Why don't you remake it before you shelve it?
Yeah, why don't we remake it before we shelve it? Now, that's what I'd call a constructive suggestion. Why don't we do the whole thing over before we put it on the shelf? You're despicable.
Super tacked on, am I right? Well, I guess that makes sense. The intro and the body of the new animation feels tacked on as well, but taking a cue from that intro, why not have something in the end about Thanksgiving? Some lame joke about his new picture being a turkey? I don't know. But we don't even get that. And don't blame your bad writing on Mike Maltese, Mr. Jones. I know what's going on here. Chuck works best when he gets artists under him that are talented and do their thing. But toward the last 25 years of his life, he got artists under him who would do his thing. And if layout, voice acting, and gags aren't your thing, but you insist on doing them anyway, you're going to be the director of a bad cartoon. Speaking of bad cartoons, Ron Diaz shared credit with Maurice Noble for production design, and it's in this Dodgers short that because Diaz is no Maurice Noble, their stuff does not meld. Diaz's stuff feels like the new animation, Noble the classics. So when you see Noble's stuff in the background surrounded by Diaz, it sticks out like a sore thumb. Or a giant red monster that is nothing but hair and shoes. I don't know. Anyway. As late in the golden age as the early 60s, Chuck had started being his own writer, and even though John Dunn is credited with writing this 1964 cartoon, The Iceman Ducketh, I have it on good authority that Chuck wrote it himself before leaving Warner Brothers, which is why it was co-directed by Phil Monroe and Maurice Noble. Incidentally, Monroe also co-directed this special. John Dunn merely had to take what Chuck had boarded out, but Jones had written several cartoons on his own after Maltese left to work at Hanna-Barbera, as well as a number of projects for his own Chuck Jones Enterprises. So, 16 years later, I feel Chuck was confident in his abilities as his own writer, whether it was deserved or not. And I believe that Mike Maltese's involvement was mainly to provide stuff for Chuck to mine, whereas in the Looney Tunes Golden Age, their writing proved to be more of a partnership. I mean, look at these storyboards. These are Mike Maltese's storyboards for Dodgers in the Return, and Chuck didn't use much of it at all. Now, I don't know how much better this thing would have been if he'd followed Maltese's storyboards to the letter, but it certainly stands as proof that Chuck was, by this point certainly, less interested in making funny cartoons and more interested in making Chuck Jones cartoons. Whatever that qualified as at the time. Now look, I love Chuck Jones. There are several eras where he's banging away on all 8 cylinders, and he did great stuff at studios other than Warner's. All of that is indisputable. But sometimes when the greats make something bad, it's even worse. We expect our greats to know better. But in a weird way, that makes us appreciate their good stuff even more. And that is definitely something to be thankful for. Happy Thanksgiving, Docs and Docettes. I'm Trevor Thompson, the self-appointed Looney Tunes critic, and until next time, that's all, folks.